Welcome to the limited audio series, St. Louis Suffragists Today, an LWVSTL production. Here we share stories of the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis. Thank you for joining us. I am Angie Dunlap, current president of the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis. In 2020, the League of Women Voters celebrated their 100-year anniversary. We want to honor the women whose shoulders we stand on, because the reality of women's rights today was enabled by the women in our past. The oral histories of League leaders capture the voices of women who are doing the work for democracy in their communities. They were learning to use their voices at the ballot box and in the halls of government where policy is made. They were, and we are, making a difference. By sharing their stories, these League leaders teach us about the persistence needed over the course of decades to be an effective voice. These audio recordings bring you a series of interviews with longtime League members. This project accompanies the book Raising Our Voices by Nicole Evelina. In today's interview, League member Kay Wentzien mentions a wide range of topics that the League has studied. And Kay mentions the LWV sponsoring presidential debates. I remember seeing some of these as a kid, and several times I have been asked why the League does not moderate these debates anymore. Here is what Nicole Evelina writes in the book, Raising Our Voices, about the League and presidential debates. In 1976, LWV of the United States expanded its voter service work to include sponsoring presidential debates. The League sponsored and moderated the debates in 1976, 1980, and 1984. The debate between Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale took place in Kansas City, Missouri. The political parties formed a presidential debates commission before the 1988 debates that set a format that did not meet League standards for fairness or nonpartisanship. Since the commission would not budge, the League withdrew its participation. At a televised news conference, the national LWV president, Nancy Newman, said, "The League has no intention of becoming an accessory to the hoodwinking of the American public." Now, listen to this interview of Kay Wentzien by St. Louis intern Anna Reynolds.
For starters, do you recall when you joined the League and why?
I do. I joined in 1966. After we had purchased a house, we lived in Chicago at the time, the Dean of Women at the University of Iowa called in a group of us our senior year and given us our instructions, what we were to do with our lives. The two things I recall were get a library card and join the League of Women Voters. So I had been busy up until then and hadn't gotten around to that. I just settled into the home life thing. A woman in our church said, "You ought to join the League of Women Voters." And I said, yes, I do.
So was the dean of the college that you had gone to, was she a pretty progressive woman?
Yeah, she was picky about who she brought in.
All right, that's really interesting. So I know you were a president for quite a few years at the League. What was the most challenging thing that you faced?
The most challenging thing at the time was the football team was trying to build a stadium in Riverport. We were very environmentally conscious, and we live in a sensitive area for the Midwest here with the Missouri and the Mississippi. I didn't know anything about it, but we had people that devoted their lives to that and knew that was not a good idea. And there were a number of other groups that didn't think it was a good idea either. There's a lot of politics involved, and some professional people and businesses that relied on some city and county were reluctant to take the leadership. And we would have closed door meetings of things that were the leaders of that too, but they had retired. So we became the lead organization with a no dome in Riverport. It was an exciting and an exasperating and stressful time.
Gotcha. And I assume that was successful?
It was successful.
even today, environmental issues have not really ceased to go away, unfortunately.
Not at all. I haven't been out there lately, but I know they have done things out there that are not good. But we thought it should be in the city.
So I want to talk to you a little more about leadership. In the 1970s in particular, the ERA came back about. But in St. Louis, we had one of the largest opponents, Miss Phyllis Schlafly. Did you have any personal connection with her?
Actually, my mother-in-law was a friend of hers.
Really?
Yes. My mother-in-law and I did not speak of politics. We had a mutual agreement. She was very politically active. She was from Iowa, and she and her husband were friends with Ronald Reagan. When he was there, he used to be a sportscaster in Des Moines. She thought Phyllis Schlafly was very, and I did not, and she knew that. And so we just didn't talk about it. But the League is nonpartisan, and we do attract progressive women, but we also used to attract pretty moderate, and I'm a moderate. I consider myself a moderate. I'm old school, and we never took a poll, but we've had pretty even division, I think, in the Webster League or the County League of Republicans and Democrats.
Now, as far as the bipartisan issue or nonpartisans, were you ever accused of favoring a certain either candidate or just progressives in general? Because there have been over the years some pretty contentious elections. There's been the Goldwater election. Goldwater wasn't elected, he ran. And there was the Trump election. He was actually elected. Were you ever accused of favoring one side? And did that reflect on the League at all?
We had very strict rules. If you were president, you could not belong to any political organization. If you were a membership chair or a VP, and really board members used to enforce those rules pretty much. I don't know that anybody even pays any attention to them anymore, but we used to be pretty careful about that. As long as we were active publicly in League affairs, that we modified our political leanings in terms of the way we talk.
You wouldn't really endorse candidates. It was more about issues.
No, right, absolutely.
In regard to issues, in the 60s and 70s, contraception really blew up because the first birth control pill came out. And there were huge Supreme Court cases like Griswold, Connecticut, and Eisenstadt Baird. Because the League tended to be pretty progressive, my assumption, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is that they were in support of contraception. And if that's true, did that make the League come across as partisan?
The League did not take a study and come to consensus on that until, I think, after we moved here. We lived in Chicago until 70. We moved here in 78. And I don't think we've taken a position on it yet because it was controversial in the League in terms of people felt strongly about it on both sides because there were so many different leagues. I don't think we certainly didn't have a national position on it. It took a while.
That makes sense. What about media for the League of Women's Voters? I know for a while y'all had a television show.
We did. She's still a League member, Debbie Howard. I never participated. I may have been on it another time. The media used to come and knock on my door when we were doing the No Don't River Report. I knew all the media people then. They were always trying to get us to put our foot in their mouths. I was supposed to be the spokesperson, so I worked hard at trying to be positive, assertive at the same time.
Did the League use lots of different forms of media to promote their messages?
We always had a press person that would send articles to the paper, op-ed articles and things.
So how have changes in the political climate over the years affected the League's?
That's an interesting question. We were very concerned then about the military-industrial complex because that was when Vietnam was going on and the Middle East was a constant thing. And St. Louis is the home of many Fortune 500 companies that were in the military-industrial complex. In fact, many of their professional folks' positions, they made sure that their spouses, because it was all men then, would join the League of Women Voters when it came to international relations. It was very discreetly spoken of and not very often, but only among a couple of folks that acknowledged it. And they didn't pay any attention to it. But we were careful. And we also took into consideration what other groups were doing and if there were other groups that were more suited to promoting one side of an issue or another. The fact is, the world is full of grays. And a lot of those same issues, they're still doing the same thing we did then. It was 50 years ago.
Now, you mentioned men briefly, because men can now be members. There was obviously quite a long period where they couldn't. Do you recall any men who contributed to the League's work? And was it important to offer household memberships?
Oh, yes, very much. The women were always for having male members, but they never wanted to change the name because there were lots of groups wanting to get the name of the League of Women Voters. So that's why they've always kept that name. I don't know what the legal implications of it are now, but there were some groups that were just lying in wait for us to change our name so they could have that. And we didn't want to give it up.
I don't blame you. It's got a lot of clout.
And the men that joined and that were active were very helpful. Very good. Very good. There weren't many of them.
I assume they were a little more progressive than what you were speaking about, husbands who were like, okay, go join. Now, in about 1965, if I have my dates correct, was the voter right. What was the League? Did they try and push for that?
That was before my time. But yes, they had. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to get involved in the League. In fact, we had moved to Oak Park, which is a suburb of Chicago, because the League of Women Voters had gotten a fair housing in the city of Oak Park before the country did. And it is still an issue. They started the Oak Park Congress. Sherilyn Reed, she and her husband were the second Black family to move to Oak Park. She was a prominent leaguer, and she and I were buddies, and she went all over the country, including here in St. Louis and in Ferguson, to bring the Oak Park Congress for fair housing.
That's really huge, obviously, especially since we still are reeling from the effects of redlining here.
Oh, they still are in Chicago. Oak Park still struggles with it. My husband was on the Housing Center Board, and the League was involved in that too. But the schools and things have improved a lot, but the conversation still go on. I just don't get it. I always said I see why all bridge players want to live in the same commune and fine, and go ahead, everybody that likes to bowl or whatever, or eat chocolate. But those of us that really want to live with people that don't necessarily look like themselves, you shouldn't be punished for it.
Oh my goodness. Can you share any ways that League members have contributed to democracy?
I think they really have. Even people that don't necessarily agree with us on some of the issues, really, I think the League has maintained respect for the large part of the public. And it's hard work to do because you can be confrontational and assertive and make your point known without being an ass about it. And some people are better at it than others. It made me get better at it. Now I'm not so good at it anymore.
You know what? Just living a long, happy life, and then you just get to say whatever you want. That's my philosophy.
Right. When you're representing the League, you can't do that. So I had to modify my behavior. The League, they used to handle the forums. They really didn't run like debates, but I think people would be relieved to have us back at this point. We've made it so it's people who are really good at doing things and who would really be good public servants really don't want to put their head in because it's like jumping into the swamp, no matter how good you are. Right? Some people that would be excellent. We need to make the climate such that people either aren't afraid or don't feel like it's a waste of their time, because it's just so important to have good people running for public office, and we need to make the climate better for people of whatever side they're on.
When did you notice those changes occurring, that we couldn't get good people running because we just had such an unhealthy climate?
I'd say maybe around the Nixon years. Certainly people should be held to high standards. And you'd think that in this day and age that people would be more discreet, I keep using that word, about what they say and do on a public forum. I'm pretty strict about it myself, but I try to understand it of others because everybody's coming from a different experience.
I know that the League is nonpartisan, but do you feel that they've been progressive in terms of openness to marginalized communities?
I think we talk a good game, but you have to go to extra effort to do it. And I think that you should bring that up because we were trying to do that back in the 80s after I moved here. I think we have fewer Black members now than we did. I'm so glad Louise is hanging in there with us, and Ida West was the president. But her generation, I think the younger Black women particularly, I think they have a lot of other things to do. I don't know anything about the membership. I know we've gotten a lot of new members. The League has never really aggressively gone out to seek membership, but because of the wonderful things they've been doing, because of the anniversaries and so forth. And we've gotten a lot of great publicity. And we've gotten a lot of new members, and how to get them engaged and active. That's a job unto itself. How did you happen to come in? You're an intern, is that right?
Yeah, I'm a graduate of Lindenwood University, and one of my professors actually got in touch. She might be a league member. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I want to talk a little bit more about your leadership. What were challenges that you really faced as a leader?
One of the challenges of leading the league, and this is true of other organizations that I've been involved with, which is good, but it can be time consuming to help everybody get along. And the league is the organization I found that most challenging. It's really good because people are very thoughtful. Everybody's come from a different place. A lot of people moved here from other communities, but there is a similarity no matter what.
So voter registration has always been really key to the league's work.
That's the other thing, the pull between education and program and the energy it takes to do what you're saying in terms of voter registration and educating people, because that makes our representative democracy great, is an educated voting public. And that's one of the best responsibilities, and that's non-controversial. That we can all agree that. Doing that and then maintaining the program of all the issues and keeping those, deciding which ones that are the priority and how to go about doing that, and having the people that are able to do it. There's a lot of things to juggle.
Were finances a part in that?
Finances, but we've always been poor. And nobody in the league ever wants to be a fundraiser. And when most organizations, that's what the board ends up doing, is raising money. It's never been a part of that. We were so fortunate that Janet Becker heard about our investment fund. Actually, Janet Becker was a member of the Sears and Roebuck family. I forget which one. You would never know it to meet her and talk to her and all the projects she was involved with.
You talked about voter registration. Does the league ever go to universities or high schools and talk to youth about voter registration?
Certainly we do to high schools now. We have a couple of people that are doing that now. We haven't always done that since 18-year-olds can vote. I couldn't vote when I was 18. But I've always said it's pretty remarkable when you think about it. My mother couldn't vote. My mother was born in 1900. That's 2 generations. Yeah. But really, we act like we've been at this a long time. And the ERA, how in the world we fought that fight. And now they've got the 32nd or 7th state or whatever it is it takes. But the deadline is fast. But so many things have happened that other laws have passed. It isn't as important as it was.
I know, because since technically the second time that the ERA came up, we've gotten Title IX and all of these other things that we didn't have before. But still, just the fact that people are fighting tooth and nail in 2021 against the ERA. I do want to know, why is the league important to you, and why do you continue your membership?
Because I think it is important to have a educated voting public, and I think the league can play a big role in that, and does play a big role in that. And while most people, I don't think, are aware of our positions on issues unless it comes up, there's always things going on in the floodplain and climate, the whole ecosystem. There's a lot of folks that have figured that out now, but we've been at it longer than a lot of people. We were in on the beginning of it in terms of concern about climate and some of these larger than life issues. And women, of course, when I joined the league, we were all smoking and all playing bridge. We all had little kids, and they had babysitting at the league meetings. So that was a good reason to join the league, because there was always childcare.
Being a working woman is hard. It really is.
I couldn't make enough to pay a babysitter.
Is there anything that I haven't addressed today that is important? You were writing a book about the league these last 50 years, and anything that you're like, hey, we haven't talked about this, but this should go in the book.
And I started to go back through my files. I actually I'm a paper hoarder. That's another thing leaguers have. That's the other nice thing about leaguers. Leaguers weren't necessarily the best housekeepers in the world. So we met in each other's houses, and we were unabashedly unashamed.
As a historian, I love to hear that, because that just means that there's historical documents everywhere. It makes me so happy.
Well, I took mine to the University of Missouri, and I don't know what they did with them, if they found anything worthwhile, but I did empty out a bunch of them, but I still have some filing cabinet left. Well, it's nice talking to you.
It was so nice talking to you.
Welcome back. I liked hearing from Kay in today's time of extreme political talk that we are not seeing the reality that the world is full of grays. And Kay also reminds us that the toxic political climate today is driving good people from running for office. Civil discussion of real issues should be a constant for our democracy to thrive. Just a follow-up about presidential elections moving forward in Missouri. In 2022, the Missouri State Legislature passed a law, HB 1878, and that law changes how Missouri voters will choose presidential candidates. Missouri is switching from presidential primaries to caucuses. Again, from the book, Raising Our Voices, the League has favored primaries since at least 1965, stating that primaries made it easier for more voter voices to be heard, reduced the influence of special interest groups, put candidates from smaller parties on an equal playing field with those from the two major parties, increased voter interest, eliminated peer pressure that could be felt at caucuses, and primaries overall were simpler, quicker, and a more straightforward process. Still, the League acknowledged that media has a larger influence over primaries, that primaries also take away a party's power to select delegates at a caucus. Primaries are more expensive, and that primaries emphasize popularity over realistic view of skills needed to lead. That was from the book, Raising Our Voices. A history for Missouri's presidential primary process is that before 1988, Missouri used a caucus system to choose presidential candidates. We had a presidential primary in 1988, but then we returned to caucuses in 1992 and 1996. We switched to primaries during the period from 2000 to 2020. Now, in 2024, Missouri voters will again be using caucuses. This will require a big education effort for the League to help voters know about and participate in the caucus process. We are concerned that the opinions of many, many voters will not be reflected in the caucus process. To close, I want to remind everyone what Kay was told by a teacher that every young adult should do as they start the great adventure of their independent life. Get a library card and join the League of Women Voters. Thank you for listening today. Thank you to our LWVSTL Centennial Committee, who worked many hours to honor the suffragists of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The interviews were conducted in 2020 and 2021 during COVID, mostly via Zoom. Come back to hear even more about the League's past and present. This oral history was made possible through the generous donations of League members. It's produced by Cindy Lenz and Angie Dunlap. Thanks again for listening.